It has my name on it too, that my mom wrote. It says Tom D on it right there. So I know it's mine.
Tom, is it soccer or am I supposed to call it football?
I think you can call it whatever you want, but we do have a guest today who might help you figure it all out, if that's helpful.
Yeah, and I guess I want to make sure that I sound like I know what I'm talking about, at least for the first inning or two of the match. It is innings for soccer, right? Like there's 9 of them.
Oh boy. Welcome to Curiously Climate, folks. I'm Tom.
And I'm Shel. And for the record, I'm not that clueless, I think, but I am curious. And today we're going to scratch that curiosity itch by talking about the World Cup. The 2026 World Cup, it is here. It is in our backyard, 16 stadiums and cities across these United States, Mexico, and Canada.
And we've been deep inside that data on what climate change has to do with this tournament. And spoiler alert, folks, it's not nothing.
Is not nothing a super scientific term?
Yep, the most scientific term I could come up with.
Perfect. All right. Seriously, though, we are talking matches where climate change is stacking the odds of player performance impairing heat even before they put on their kits and lace up their boots.
And to help us understand what that actually means for the game, not just the numbers, but the future of the sport itself, we've got a great guest today. We'll be talking with Elliot Arthur-Worsop from Football for Futures.
Okay, so the first thing I want to start with, we'll get into a very important conversation. Elliot, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this on the video version of the podcast, Tom, you've got some drip going today. We need to know all about what you're wearing.
Yeah, I think this is from 1998, which, if you know, it's a U.S. jersey or whatever it is. It's got the collar, and you can tell it's from the 90s because, one, the color scheme is a mess, and two, it's very baggy. For some, this is a small, and I didn't think I could fit into it because I don't fit in the smalls anymore. But I think it's because it's the 90s and everything was super kind of like loose that it fits great. And if you know anything about how the United States did in the 1998 World Cup, I believe that we were one of the worst countries who played in that World Cup. We didn't win. I think we scored like a goal and we lost all 3 of our games. So not the highest moment of U.S. soccer, but fun that I still fit into it and it still looks okay.
Maybe if they had better swag, they would have done better in the tournament. Okay, so if you're only listening to this podcast, it is a Nike branded, very baggy. It's got a Team USA, shield in the middle, some red, white, and blue on either side. My favorite part, though, is how 90s the collar is stitched into what shouldn't be a collared shirt.
I know, and if you're watching, usually I imagine I probably wore this popped at the time, and I'd have it as a popped collar.
You probably had 2 or 3 polos underneath it as well, also with the pop collar. Yeah. Do you also, we can only see the top half of Tom. Are you wearing Jinko jeans as well in this moment? Some Doc Martens?
Yes. The whole thing with a metal chain connected to my wallet, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Elliot, I don't know. Did Jinkos and Doc Martens, did that make it across the pond? Are those just American terrible?
No, Doc Martens, absolutely. You'll even see them out and about today. They're having a little bit of a resurgence. But what else was the Dinkos?
Jinkos, yeah. They were like, honestly, they're kind of coming back too. Think like parachute pants, but for jeans, and just like a really big bell bottom at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Kind of like almost like, is it like kind of skater vibes almost? Did you see those like in skate parks back in the day? Yeah, for sure. I may have had a pair or two when I was a youngster.
Okay, so now that we've got fashion out of the way, my most important question for you, Elliot, before we tell everybody who you are, can we call it soccer? Do we call it football? Like, help me be cool.
I think the most important thing is that everyone feels comfortable. So call it whatever's best for you. I will call it football, though. I will call US soccer football throughout this, just because that's what I usually just revert to. So as a disclaimer, that's going to be my choice of terminology.
Perfect. Okay, so football. Elliot, tell us about yourself. Tell us about Football for Future. Why do you do what you do?
No, thanks so much, Shel. So yeah, I mean, I've got a background in the environmental sciences, and I remember at university learning about how awful the climate crisis was. And I remember graduating thinking, wow, like I can't wait to really like see how all of the adults in the world are sorting out this mess, and how big businesses and governments and scientists have got it all under control. And then I graduated and I was like, where is the climate movement? Where's the response? Where's the global response to this? And honestly, I was like kind of bamboozled. When you're a youngster, you think adults have got it all under control, and then you become an adult and you realize the world's a big mess. So for me, I was like inspired by like how change can happen very quickly, and I got very interested in social movements and various other types of social movements, whether this was like civil rights or the labor movement or the suffragettes. And I didn't really see a climate movement that existed anywhere in the world other than like, you had sustainability consultancies, and you had Greenpeace and WWF, but nothing that I could get involved in or really feel associated with, and nothing that my friends could really associate with either. And like I got down a little bit of a rabbit hole with like social movements, and ended up founding the social media and running the Instagram for Extinction Rebellion back in the day. And we created a lot of change and saw a lot of protests and climate in the media. And then trying to understand that achieved some amazing change. Love it or hate it, it really did put climate on the radar in a lot of places where XR was kind of had a stronghold. But even still, it struggled to break the echo chamber in a significant way. So there was a moment during COVID when football and politics really collided in a crazy and unprecedented way. You had Marcus Rashford with his Free School Meal campaign, and you had the Lionesses in England won the Euros, and we saw like, this huge conversation around gender and football and women's football. And then in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, we saw all of these players taking a knee, and the European Super League, and all of these demonstrations from fans and protests. And I was like, wow, football was having this crazy moment. And I was like, where's like climate? Where's the climate conversation in football? I've been a football fan my whole life. I'm a Brighton fan. And from a movement building perspective, I was kind of wondering how like any social phenomenon could be more exciting than football to be able to progress the climate conversation. Football has historically been used as an amazing vehicle for many important conversations, from racial justice, gender equity, LGBTQ plus conversations. And yeah, there was this deafening silence around climate, apart from Forest Green Rovers. So I tried to like understand and visualize what a climate movement in football could look like. So I decided to study that for my master's degree, and that project spilled outside the classroom, and soon enough we were doing the first activations with professional football players, using their platforms to talk about why it's important to protect the planet, and developing sustainability strategies for Premier League clubs, and working with sportswear brands, etc., etc. And yeah, like, fast forward 6 years, we work with the Premier League, we work with a lot of major tournaments that are happening around the world. We've worked with the biggest activations of professional women's players around the Women's World Cup, and we've just done the same around the Men's World Cup. And the whole space has really progressed so much. And I know I'm blabbing on a little bit, but at a time when the world feels so divided, football really like can unite people in such a unique and unparalleled way. There's nothing else in the world like it. And a lot of people say that it's the most powerful social phenomenon in the world, and they can measure that through media numbers, or they can measure it through broadcasting statistics, or also just the way that football makes people feel. I walk down the street here in a football shirt, and by the time I get from one end to the other, I've already made 3 new friends. Like, it's crazy. It's a crazy, crazy thing. And, you can have that anywhere in the world. And, like football's far from perfect, and it belongs to everyone. And it's an amazing platform and vehicle for so many people to do so many amazing things. So, really excited that I've just been like so blessed and privileged over the last few years to like live my dream. And I didn't quite make it as a professional football player, but I've still got to work with my favorite club and my favorite players, and to work for a bigger purpose. And the whole sector is super exciting. Not only what we're doing, but I'm loving like everything that Climate Central is doing at the minute in this space too.
You know who else didn't make it as a professional football player? Tom Diobino.
Nope. It wasn't because of my lack of skill or anything like that. Obviously, it was just, opportunities. It's all political. No, congrats on the Gulls. They had a good season relatively. I mean, you still qualified for Europe, at least in some sense, which is not bad.
In some
Uh,
sense.
I mean, eighth is it's still there. But I'm a Liverpool fan. It was also not a banner year for my fan. But I'm curious. You guys just had a really big report come out. Pitches in Peril. I would love to hear a little bit more about it. And how that came to be, and some of the big conclusions from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that was Pitches in Peril, and I think it was the most like in-depth like climate risk analysis that's ever been done around the major tournament, as far as I'm aware. They hold me to that one, but I think like actually like how it came about is something that's very interesting, and I've got to say like none of we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and none of what I do is original. We just kind of like take inspiration and repackage it from other people and places. But I convened like I ended up doing my master's thesis on like reflecting on football for future and how to grow the climate movement within the national football context, and focused on our work in English football. And I brought together a lot of the people who've been leading the growth of the movement. I had professional players, and I had journalists, and I had campaigners, and I had people from domestic like professional sporting leagues and football clubs. We all came together and we had all these workshops, and we were reflecting on what the journey's been and what the key moments have been in the growth of the climate movement in English football. And one of the key things that everyone kept on coming back to, maybe the key moment, was a report that was published in 2019 by a guy called David Goldblatt, who some of your listeners might know. David Goldblatt is a broadcaster, journalist, author, artist, academic, just great guy. And he published a report called or he authored a report called Playing Against the Clock, and it looked at the relationship between sport and climate change more generally. And one statistic in that report found that by 2050, 1/4 of football clubs in England will be flooded. And that framing was like the first time that I had ever heard of the relationship between football and climate change in a relatable way, like such a relatable way. It really connected the dots for the first time and created a space for a whole new kind of like imagination to exist when it came to climate communication. And everyone kept on coming back to that stat. 25% of clubs are going to be flooded. 25% of clubs are going to be flooded. And that just allowed us to speak to football fans, and speak to people in football, and speak to clubs about why it's important, why climate change is important, and why it's relevant to the football industry. So because of that, I was like, wow, like David did this analysis on like English football, and English football's powerful. And it was just looking at flooding, and I was like, well, flooding's great, but like, what's bigger than English football? The World Cup. And what's more interesting than flooding? Well, wildfires and extreme heat. And I thought, how can we kind of like take what David did, and like which sparked the climate conversation in English football, and take that onto like a bigger, more intentional, like big stage of the World Cup. So that was kind of the the birth or like journey of how Pitches in Peril came to be, which was inspired by David Goldblatt. Shout out, what a legend. And anyway, so then we took that approach, and we decided to do even more in depth. Like David's analysis was great, but we partnered with a climate intelligence organization called Jupiter Intelligence, and we used their model to be able to do really like asset level, like very in-depth climate risk analyses across all of these different types of weather categories, not just flooding. We did it for all of the World Cup host stadiums, but then we thought it's a little bit, it's a little bit unfair just to focus on North America and just to focus on multi-million-dollar stadiums. So we also thought, let's take the grassroots pitches globally that belong to the most iconic World Cup legends, like the pitches where they began their careers. So we did the same for all of their pitches as well. So we've got like Tim Cahill's pitch in Australia, Kwangmin Son's pitch in Korea, Honda's in Japan, Akinfeev in Russia, Troost-Ekong in Nigeria, Salah in Egypt, Neymar, Pele, etc., Mbappe, David Beckham. So we got like quite a nice global distribution of legends and grassroots pitches as well. Like obviously, when we did the analysis, the grassroots pitches were way more vulnerable than the stadiums, and the pitches in the global south were also incredibly more vulnerable. But in addition to that, we also did the biggest ever survey of football fans to understand their sentiment and awareness towards climate change and environmental sustainability. We surveyed fans across the host nations. We did I think about 4,000 fans in total. That was a baseline survey. We're going to do a follow-up survey after the tournament to measure the impact of all the campaigning that everyone's been working on. And we also did the biggest activation of professional men's players, like using their platforms to advocate for the planet. And we included all of that in the report. So there's loads of things in there. There's recommendations, there's policy commitments and policy asks that we recommend the football industry, recommendations for elite clubs, grassroots clubs, and then all of the very in-depth analysis of the climate risks. We forecast to 2050. We also do the sort of like baseline climate risk analysis of today, and we also went back and did an analysis of 1994, which was the last time the World Cup was hosted in North America, to show like a bigger sort of range of change between the last time and the current time, and potentially the next time that the tournament will be hosted there, so we can see the change of like playable days over time, and we can predict all of these different types of like extreme weather events that are going to happen across extreme heat, temperature, drought, flooding, wind speeds, and then we've developed a methodology to assign like what are the thresholds of these different types of weather events that you can have, whereby football needs to be adapted in order to be played, or where beyond which football simply becomes unplayable. So instead of communicating to a football fan like, oh, we're going to have this many days that are going to be this temperature by 2050, it's a little bit meaningless to a lot of people. But if you can say by 2050 there's going to be 150 days where football is unplayable because it's too dangerous to kick a ball, then all of a sudden it becomes so relatable to 3 billion people around the world. You can really start to have a conversation in an entirely new way. And also, not only that, but to be able to show the change, be like, maybe today there's like 20 days that are unplayable, and then by 2050 there's going to be 80 days that are unplayable. So we're talking about climate change through like football playability, which is completely radical, very new. And we try to align the playability thresholds with a lot of academia around health and safety, and also guidelines from leading football governing bodies and player membership organizations, including FIFA and FIFA Pro as well. So we really tried to give respect to a lot of like the institutions that are already calling the shots when it comes to health and safety in football.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I have spent a long time. Not that this is the important part of it, but it's a beautiful report, like just the way it's laid out. Like your designer, top notch. Keep them on staff.
Shout out to Rich. Yeah.
All right. Time out, Shel.
Wait.
Time out for a second.
Oh, wait, are you throwing a red card at me?
No, it wasn't not red card worthy, just a yellow card. Caution. Let's talk more about climate change in the World Cup. What do you got for me?
Yeah, so Elliot mentioned 1994. If that date didn't resonate for you, that's the last time we hosted the World Cup here in North America. But the first time we ever did was 1970. So we're able to understand, of the 16 host cities, we know that 14 of those have experienced some sort of warming since the first World Cup. Do you know what the two stadiums that have not experienced as much warming is?
San Francisco, is that one of them?
Yeah, so I think your geography teacher would be proud of you. So San Francisco's one, Los Angeles is another. It's not to say that there won't be heat that impacts performance, but we know that historically June and July is generally okay. So the thing that we looked at was what's called the 90th percentile of heat or temperature. Do you know what the 90th percentile is?
Sounds like you're giving me a test.
I sure am.
Does it basically mean temperatures that are part of the 10% warmest for that area?
Yeah, the hottest of the hot that you would expect, right? In the cities during the months of June and July when we're playing the World Cup. So when we really looked at this, there were 4 stadiums that stood out the most to us. I'm going to test you one more time. But we've got Mexico City, we've got Guadalajara, we've got Miami, and we've got Houston. In your soccer mind, of those 4 stadiums, what is a problem that you see there?
I think only Houston's climate controlled, right? Are the other 3 out in the open?
You just earned yourself a gold star, my friend. Yeah, Houston's the only one that's climate controlled. So all the other ones, we know that there's high odds pretty much for almost every single match that they could be impacted by heat that impacts performance. Now, that's temperatures of 82 degrees, 82.4 to be exact, or higher. Once we hit that threshold, we know that player performance slows. Maybe they're not as sharp, and maybe they're just not quite playing the game that we know that these elite athletes can play. So when we look and when we talk about heat in the World Cup, that's one of the big reasons. We know that there's fan impacts, we know that there's official impacts, but we really want to understand how does an impact play on the pitch. July 19th, New Jersey, America. That is the final match. If you're listening to this podcast at release, it hasn't happened yet. We know that there's going to be two teams there, but we don't know exactly which two teams. We also know, though, that those two teams are going to be facing one extra opponent on the pitch besides each other. And that's most likely going to be heat. Historical odds tell us that there is a 47% likelihood. We're using attribution science here to understand all of this, but a 47% likelihood of performance impairing heat. So crossing that 82.4 degree threshold, that would have been 17 percentage points lower if it wasn't for human caused climate change. We'll see what the actual weather plays out to be, but as we have seen through the World Cup, as we expected, a lot of folks have already been talking about this, but as we expected, we've already seen that heat has been an impact to our players and to our matches.
And when the margins are so slim, when you get to that final match, it's the little things that can mean the whole difference between who wins and who loses.
Right. And for as long as you have been playing through the match to get to that final match, it would be a real shame if heat was the reason that you weren't able to play your best match, essentially.
That makes sense. Well, I did a VAR and they said, rescind that yellow card. You're all good to go. Let's jump right back into the conversation.
Okay, cooling break is over. On timeout. How much are footballers thinking about climate change when they think about their day-to-day? Because this is their job. It's their passion, it's their livelihood, but it is their job too, right? And it's their safety and their health. So how much are they thinking about it? And then is there anything being done? And I'll come back around for a second question after this, but is there anything being done to adapt and to mitigate against the changes we've already experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, I think a lot of people are thinking about climate change, and like when it comes to professional players as well, like everyone, they always take the limelight. Everybody always wants to meet them or know what they're thinking or know what they're doing or talking about. Or if we're organizing an event, the organizer's like, this sounds great, but are there going to be any famous players coming? So they're always under so much scrutiny. And you know what? I think like one thing that I've been pleasantly surprised about is just how many people do care about the planet. But I think there's a lot of pre-existing stereotypes about like the sort of person that cares about it publicly and the sort of person that uses their voice to stand up for this stuff. And there's a lot of like stereotypes or identifiers around like being a hippie or a vegan or, you know, an activist or whatever it might be. But when you like, firstly, like the whole sort of like climate community and science and advocacy sort of like sector, you need to work really hard to disrupt those stereotypes because ultimately those stereotypes are what determines whether or not people want to be associated with the work that we're doing. Secondly, the beautiful thing though is like they're not, these stereotypes are not helpful because they don't represent what people actually feel. Because I think all of us would be very hard pressed to go for a walk out on the street or even around a football stadium or a dressing room full of professional players and try to find somebody who would say that they don't care about the planet and they don't think it's important to protect the planet. And I think like when you boil it down to that, like you can really have some amazing conversations with people that maybe they wouldn't say that they're like a climate advocate, but they say that they care about the planet. And I think if we can kind of like agree on that and align on that, that is a really important foundation for us to have some potentially amazing conversations. And once you establish that, you can talk about, okay, what does that look like for this person? And I've been like really pleasantly surprised, like with a lot, I've never, you know what, one funny thing was like Fatboy Slim, he's like a DJ, like he used to sponsor like my favorite club, Brighton. He's like I tried to get him on the panel we were doing at Glastonbury once, so he was like, climate's not really my thing. I was like, you know what, Norman, some people just want to watch the planet burn. But you know, he obviously does care about the planet. And like, so this has been an amazing thing. Like, you know, I think we're starting to see more and more players use their platforms for it. They don't want to be called a hypocrite, but once again, I think just, you know, everyone working in the space like knows now that it's not about being perfect. You know, if everyone, the only people who could, you know, vocalize that they cared about the planet were perfect, none of us would be doing these jobs apart from me, because I'm perfect. No, you know what's funny? Like, I'm sat here, I didn't want to get it on camera, but I've got a plastic bottle with me, like I just like, this is the world that we live in. Like, I think if we can kind of like meet people on that level and show our imperfections and be open about that, then once again we can start to disrupt the sort of the notion of who can be using their voice in this space. So that was a question, kind of an answer about a question about players. I can't even remember what it was. I don't know if I hit the nail on the head or went completely off script there. But what was the other one? Sorry, Shel.
No, I mean, that was good. And I would pause for a second to say the only difference between Fatboy Slim and Tom right now, Tom's not wearing a bucket hat. That's the only thing. Like, if he had a bucket hat on, he could be Fatboy Slim from the late 90s, early 2000s.
So I'll break out into praise you in the Rockefeller skank whenever you want me to. The jerseys from 1998, Fatboy Slim. I mean, it's the parallels are too eerie.
Yeah. Look, this is going to be an all 90s podcast at this point. No, okay. So I think that's a really good couple things I want to pull out of that. One, talking about players, talking about you, like it is like you said, it's meeting people where they are. And I think the other thing, I was talking with Jasmine Spencer. She's a player here in the States, and she was like, give your players, your favorite players, your team that you love, give them grace, because like they're dealing with this heat and they're dealing with a lot of other things. There's a lot of pressure that goes around it. I think that's just an important moment to realize, like, we all come at this differently. We all probably have the same thing in mind. We're just doing it a little bit different. And I think that's a great piece of that. So, okay. So my other question was in terms of adaptation, and this isn't to call, FIFA out specifically, but one of the things everyone's like, well, it's going to be really hot. What are you going to do about it? And they're like, okay, we're going to mandate these 3-minute cooling breaks. And I've heard mixed reviews. A lot of the players we've talked to, I think that the most static one for me was, sure, you get this 3-minute break. It's not enough time to bring down your core temperature, but those 3 minutes don't vanish. They get tacked on to the end when you're already absolutely just like tired and hot by that point. So I think my question after that long little diatribe there is cooling breaks. What's your take? What do you think?
This is like what's the dude's name? Kareem on the subway. What's your take?
Yeah.
Cooling breaks. I think I've heard various things about them. Like I completely agree. At the end of the day, that time doesn't vanish. So it doesn't allow your core body temperature to go down, and then those minutes get added on to the next. You don't play any less time for the second half of the game or whatever it is. So, I've heard people say that maybe it's an excuse to be able to get more time to squeeze in a few more adverts and make a little bit more revenue from like a global broadcasting. But I don't know about that. I think the cooling breaks, they're not a solution, are they? Like ultimately, like, it's climate adaptation. A lot of people like, it is climate adaptation, but it's not a solution. It's kind of like FIFA's first kind of like, I was gonna say their first kind of like exploration into this space, but I don't think they're necessarily doing it for purely like player protection purposes. But it's not FIFA's first foray into the climate adaptation space, because if you remember from wearing your Santa Claus hat a couple of years ago, we had a Winter World Cup, and we saw a whole tournament be moved to the complete opposite side of the year, which is a crazy and really powerful example of climate adaptation right at the very, very top levels of the game. So it's funny, like trying to like convince football that or like sometimes reflecting on our work, trying to convince football that there's a climate crisis, but we're like, actually no, these guys they're already aware of climate extremes. They're already aware of this, and for the last few years they've actually been acknowledging it, and like I guess kind of changing the way that they operate and run their tournaments in relation to that. But cooling breaks, I don't know, like there's a lot of noise about them at the moment. I don't have a hot take. That's my hot take. I just think that there's a lot of noise about them. They're not going to solve the problem. Maybe it's going to make FIFA a little bit more revenue. It's not going to bring down the core temperature of the players significantly to make a big difference. So I'm kind of like focusing my energy and effort in other places right now.
Okay, actually, I have one more question. More hot takes to put you on the hot seat here. In 30 seconds or less, tell me, Vuvuzela, are you in or are you out?
You know what? Vuvuzela, the one word that comes to mind, iconic. there's like few other like World Cup footages that I can watch, and it just really brings me back to that moment in time. I didn't love them at the time, but now like I think over time they really kind of they're iconic. That's the word, and I love it. It really does. It takes me back to a time and a place, and I think that's a very beautiful, powerful thing, and it goes very well with football.
Now I have a couple of things to know. Love the vuvuzelas. I have no idea what's gonna be the equivalent this year. No idea. We have we have thunder sticks where you just bang them together. It's gonna be so embarrassing to show that to the rest of the world. Is like that's what we're gonna bring to the game here. Let alone our chance just not being nearly as good as any other country. But the one thing I wanted to mention and like to talk about is how you brought up the Winter World Cup. Like this is not going to be a problem that goes away. The next men's World Cup after this one is in Spain and Morocco, which is hot. And next year the Women's World Cup is in Brazil, not also known for, its cold temperatures. So, the idea of like adapting, like it's going to be necessary. And these summer World Cups are happening after all of these players just spent their season just ended. So they're at their limits to begin with. And now you're putting these players into this position where they have to do that, but also do it under just extreme potential conditions. It's like I can see why like there's so much concern for it, but yeah, it's going to take a lot of like players, and you hope it doesn't lead to a case where have to have someone pass out on the field for there to be a broader sort of action taken. Hopefully, we can do that beforehand, and we can deal with cooling folks down and making it so that these players can perform at their best.
I completely agree. And the men's World Cup after Spain, Morocco, and Portugal, and also it's not just Spain, Morocco, Portugal, it's also Uruguay and whatever. But it's Saudi Arabia, and I believe that they've already maybe made the decision internally to also host that outside of the usual kind of like Northern Hemisphere summer window. I wanted to just also talking about climate adaptation, like different creative approaches. I heard that during the Club World Cup last year, they had these like small like crocs for the police dogs to be able to protect their feet when they're patrolling around the stadiums, and all these like small like adaptive quirks. Like, obviously, we're aware of the AC that was in the stadiums in Qatar. This is like absolutely not a long-term solution to the problem. But I just want to pull up a WhatsApp that I got from my colleague Dan today, Dan French, shout out, great guy, which is a post on Versus, which is a fantastic football media platform, a new culture football media platform. That Adidas have unveiled a new technology to keep players cool, and it's like it's a jersey that's got heat control in it. You know those like pouches that you kind of like burst and they change temperature. I'm like, wow, this is really some. This is some dystopian futures that we're walking into right now, where instead of cooling the climate, let's just cool the jerseys that the players wear and call it done, and you leave the problems for the next generation to solve.
Yeah, my news feed kept. I don't know why, but I mean, maybe because it's where I live and it's just perpetually hot here. But it kept feeding me this thing that you put on like the back of your neck, and it's like an air conditioner. It doesn't actually blow any air; it just kind of cools right here. And I had the same thought. I was like, so we're gonna spend all this money, create more things to try to keep us cool versus just like doing the thing that we know we need to do, which is bring down heat trapping pollution so that we're not as hot in the future, right? Like it's great to have those measures to keep us safe, but at the same time, like that's a band-aid. It's not the whole solution.
It's a band-aid, but it's like a band-aid that also like exacerbates the pre-existing problem. It's like, where are we getting like it takes the focus off the actual solution, and it also uses a lot of I mean, think about AC, for crying out loud. Like the amount of energy that goes into AC, and how are we getting that energy? We're probably burning fossil fuels to be able to cool us down because it's too hot, and then it gets hotter, and it's like, oh goodness me, it hurts my brain sometimes.
Yeah, it's a six cycle feedback loop, right? Okay, so I think maybe my big question, and then we can wrap this up, but who's your team? Who's going to take it this year?
You know what? I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that. I think that France's second lineup would probably still be able to win the tournament. I think just like the strength and depth that they've got, and just some of the best players in the world who are on just some of the greatest form in the world. I really think that they're probably gonna take it. That's what my head says. My heart obviously says the Three Lions. Thomas Tuchel is going to be the first. He's going to be the first manager of a foreign nationality to win the World Cup, which is also a mad stat somebody reminded me of yesterday. There's never been a World Cup winning manager, or every single World Cup winning manager has been the same nationality of the team that he's managed. Like, wow, that's mad, isn't it? So we're going to see that Thomas Tuchel is going to shake it up this year for me.
Hopefully, yeah, England can bring it home. My question for you, besides that, in the play, what are you specifically paying attention to at this World Cup? Like from a heat angle and from a climate angle, like what sort of things kind of are you trying to see get mentioned, or what actually takes place? Because we know the World Cup starts when we're recording this week, and it looks like it's going to be pretty hot for the East Coast, where some of these games are being played.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I have been reflecting on that recently. And I think, firstly, I'm interested to see who's going to be reporting on it and how much noise there's going to be around it. Who's going to be using their platform to acknowledge these climate extremes. I think we're going to see I think we're going to be unfortunately pleasantly surprised as climate advocates how many places and how many people and how many platforms are going to be vocalizing these unbearable conditions. I think it's going to be a watershed tournament for the climate conversation, to be honest. I don't think the climate conversation around major sporting events is ever going to be the same after this. Secondly, I'm interested to see, because it's not enough just to report on extreme weather. You know, we need journalists to do their job properly and talk about climate change. They need to talk about the reason why we're experiencing this extreme weather. It's not enough to say that the temperature's hot, because that doesn't really do the job in terms of being able to like shift awareness of what the problem is, which is what we all urgently need to do, and we all have a responsibility to do, especially journalists. And maybe football players who also have a responsibility, with great power and millions of followers comes great responsibility. That's that line from Spider-Man, isn't it? I'm interested to see how much climate change also comes into the conversation beyond just people talking about extreme temperatures.
Yeah, and we know that it's not just temperature, right? It's North America in the summer, so you've got hurricanes, you got wildfires, you got heavy rain. Weather's always been part of the game, but it's just seems like it's a little bit more of the game than it used to be. So,
Yeah.
all right. He is Elliot. The organization is Football for Futures. The report is Pitches in Peril. And of course, if you want to dive in and look at all of the matches, we've got a nice little information hub for you up at climatecentral.org, where you can go in, look at your matches, look at your teams, look at the tournament view, look at the stadium, however you want to slice and dice it. We've got the weather taken care of, and then we'll see what happens on the pitch. Elliot, we appreciate your time today.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. And just one final plug as well. We're going to be hosting a football and climate summit in New York the day before the World Cup final. So if any of your listeners are going to be there, we're going to be launching an adaptation blueprint for major tournaments, a teaser of a documentary. We're going to have panels. Hopefully it looks like we're going to be having some player representation as well. So we'd love to have any of your community come there. But yeah, Shel, Tom, thank you so much for your time. It's been great. And yeah, all the way from Fatboy Slim to baggy trousers and extreme weather and impact in football. So love it.
I think that was great. I learned a ton. I hope all the listeners learned a whole bunch too.
Yeah, can we note something real quick? So during that conversation, our producer Raina in the background, when we were talking about Doc Martens and Jinkos, did you know that Doc Martens they started across the pond? They're like inherently a European thing at first.
You were on a roll. I didn't want to stop you. I figured that you can't get much more English than Doc Martens, but you were so passionate about it.
And Elliot was so kind. He just kind of rolled with it. If he knew, he didn't let on to that. But here's the thing. Curiously Climate, we're not only giving you climate information, we're also scratching that pop culture itch for you as well. And we brought back Fatboy Slim, who I haven't thought about Fatboy Slim in at least a decade, if not more.
Learn about climate science, as well as get some trivia facts for the next time at Trivia Night.
Tom, I want to praise you for doing a great job on this podcast.
It's surely Rockefeller.
Okay, we're going to leave now.
Bad.
We have reached full time. Thanks for joining Curiously Climate. I am Shel.
And I am Tom.
Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch you back here on the next episode of Curious Climate.